Lesson 4, Unit 3, Data Collection. Data collection deals with the sources of data and the methods to collect the data for each indicator identified in the performance framework matrix. In this step, the project manager also needs to consider the frequency of the data collection, the people who will be responsible for data collection, and the resources needed to collect the data. An important rule in results-based monitoring is that the project should collect only the data that is intended to be used. The performance information is a management tool, and there is no need to collect information that the project and key stakeholders are not going to use. When deciding the data sources for the performance indicator, the project manager can use the following questions to help identify the best sources of data. What is the data that we need? Where is the data located? Who has access to this data? Is the data available from existing sources? And most important, is the data of good quality, reliable, and relevant? These questions can help the project manager develop a plan to collect the data needed to monitor the project performance. Primary data sources. This is the data that the project has decided will select and collect directly with methods that involve direct contact with the providers of information. There are 5 typical sources of primary data. Project data is information on the project budget, schedule, and data in the implementation activities. Beneficiaries are the major sources of data and the project has direct access to them. They provide direct or first-hand evidence about the changes that are occurring. Another source of data is the control group identified by the project. The project may also identify the need to collect data from local organizations, key stakeholders, and other sources that meet the needs of the project. Collecting data from primary sources is usually costly and time-consuming. The project manager should evaluate the needs against the cost of each source. Secondary data sources. This is the data that already exists. It's data collected by other organizations or institutions. For example, government statistics, official health data, data from research institutions, other development organizations, and even the websites that specialize in the data required by the project. This is the data that has been collected to meet a specific objective or purposes that may be different from the project. Secondary data may be more cost-effective or may be the only option available when primary data is not practical. When secondary data is identified, the project manager should be cautious on the quality, reliability, relevance, credibility, and validity before using it to track the performance indicators. If the data is of good quality, then the use of secondary data can represent a significant savings in both cost and time for the project. Here are some of the differences between primary and secondary data to take into consideration when deciding the data sources for tracking the performance indicators. Primary data is real-time data. There is confidence on the sources, has no biases, and there is more flexibility at the time of collecting it, but is more expensive and takes more time to collect it. Secondary data, on the other hand, is past data, but there is less confidence on the sources of data, might have some biases, is less flexible, but is less expensive and takes less time to collect it. The use of secondary data sources can be a cost-effective approach to monitor the project when secondary sources are used. The project manager should take in consideration some basic principles of data quality. The first one is validity. If data measures what is intended to measure. Reliability. That is measured and collected consistently according to standard definitions and methodologies. The results are the same when measurements are repeated. Completeness. All the data elements are included as per the definitions and methodologies specified. The next one is precision. That data has the sufficient detail. Next is integrity. That the data is protected from deliberate bias or manipulation for political or personal reasons. And finally, timeliness, that the data is up to date, it is current, and information is available on time. Once there is a definition of the data sources the project will use to collect the data, the project manager can use the following questions to identify the methods to collect the data. How are we going to collect it? What tools and process we need to collect the data? And what is the effort required? Answering these questions will guide the project manager and the project team in the selection of the best methods to collect data. A method is an established systematic way of carrying out a particular task. Results-based monitoring uses different methods or procedures to collect data. The methods represent how the data about indicators will be collected. The methods range from informal and formal methods. Informal methods are unstructured and don't follow a specific process. On the other hand, formal methods are structured and follow a specific process. The choice of data collection method depends on the type of indicator, the purpose of the information being gathered, and the frequency of the data collection. There is no one method better than the other. It all depends on the needs of the project. Informal collection methods have little structure. They include conversation with stakeholders, community interviews, field visits, review of documents, and observation of participants. These methods are less precise, less expensive, and require less time. These methods are chosen when the project doesn't need frequent data. Most of these methods are also used to collect qualitative data when the project needs to have an in-depth understanding of some of the issues. Formal collection methods have more structure. They include research, census, panel surveys, sample surveys, questionnaires, and focus groups. These methods are more precise, they are more expensive, and require more time to collect them. If the project needs data more frequently to inform management and key stakeholders, then it can adopt to use formal methods. Most of these methods are used to collect quantitative data. The frequency for collecting the data depends on the type of indicators. Some indicators will require collections that are more frequent than others. For example, output indicators are collected more often than outcome indicators. The project manager will need to define the frequency based on the need to have information to monitor the performance and the cost of collecting the data. The project should collect only the amount of data that can be used to monitor the performance. More is not always better. Additionally, the project manager will need to consider that the cost of collecting the data can influence on the frequency of collecting data. Based on this information, the project manager can develop a schedule for data collection that identifies the dates and duration for these activities. Finally, the project manager must define the people or groups that will be responsible for collecting the data. Who will collect the data? And so careful consideration must be made when selecting the right people for this delicate job. Do they have the skills to collect the data? Whoever is selected should have the skills required to collect the data. This includes knowledge of the techniques to interview beneficiaries. Do they know how to use the tools or instruments to collect the data? The project manager will need to evaluate their skills and, if required, ensure that they are properly trained in their use before starting the data collection activities. People that will be responsible for collecting the data can include members of the project team or a dedicated unit in the organization that provides support to the project, such as M&E officers, consultants, and other external parties can be hired for the task of collecting the data. For example, research institutions that specialize in data collection or staff from partner organizations that may have the required expertise and knowledge of the area. Even beneficiaries can be assigned with some responsibilities in collecting the data. They have an in-depth understanding of the language and social norms.